If you've been following tech news in the past month, you've probably heard already that Apple released their new mid-tier desktop Mac, the Mac Studio, in the March event. Now, to be fair, mid-tier is a bit understated for this machine, because the truth is this tiny aluminum box packs comparable power to equivalent high-end desktop PC towers. Even compared to the Mac Pro from only less than 3 years ago, it still manages to beat the thing out in a lot of areas. Let's see if this groundbreaking new Mac can be put to good use in the real world for its value. Of course, the entire reason that they're able to pull this off is the incredible efficiency that Apple Silicon provides compared to their inferior Intel counterpart. Ever since Apple released their M1 chip at the end of 2020, the entire desktop processor market has been utterly shattered by efficiency and value Apple Silicon offers. Now the issue with the M1 for many professionals wasn't its efficiency, but its raw horsepower. This is why Apple released a year later at the end of 2021 their M1 Pro and M1 Max chips that increased the core count, graphics performance, media encoders, memory, and everything else in quantity to give the power needed for higher end workflows while still having all the benefits of Apple Silicon. But for some, that still wasn't enough, as these chips could only be purchased in MacBook Pros and were never released in a Mac Mini or an iMac. So that's when the Mac Studio came into play. The Mac Studio starts at $2,000, featuring an M1 Max chip with its 10-core CPU, a bin 24-core GPU, 32 gigabytes of RAM, and a small 512 gigabytes of SSD storage. If you want to upgrade it, you can get their new M1 Ultra, best thing Apple marketing team could come up with, which basically takes two M1 Max processors and sticks them together like Lego bricks, basically doubling all the specs on the M1 Max. This means you can get a 20-core CPU, up to a whopping 64-core GPU, an absolutely ridiculous 128 gigabytes of RAM, and up to 8 terabytes of storage. The crazy part about this is it's all included in a little 8-inch aluminum box that can sit on your desk, barely making any fan noise. This is a benefit you can only really get with Apple Silicon, while still getting that kind of performance. In terms of I/O, you get 4 Thunderbolt 4 ports, 10 gigabit Ethernet as standard, unlike the Mac Mini, 2 USB-A and HDMI 2.0, not 2.1, and finally, a high impedance headphone jack. But not finally, because in the first time in a long time, we get actually front I/O on a Mac. There's 2 USB-C ports, which become Thunderbolt 4 if you opt for the M1 Ultra, and card slot. Thank you. But you've probably already seen the reviews for this thing and are familiar with all the specifications. The question is this computer worth buying for the price you pay? I think that depends on several different factors. First of all, you need to know what exactly you want to do on your computer. Are you a video editor, graphic designer, photo editor, audio editor? Do you want to play AAA games? Do you want to do programming? Or do you just want to use your computer casually? To be honest, I think most people would actually be fine with any M1 Mac. This processor can do almost anything you can throw it at, from web browsing to word processing, emailing, and even lightweight photo and video editing. The chip can handle it. Especially if you're coming from an Intel system, then you will definitely notice how much snappier things are. If you're that kind of person, which you would know if you're not, then go for the Mac Mini or a MacBook Air. But the M1 still comes with some limitations. For example, it only supports one external display, which can be super problematic for a lot of people. Also, you're limited to 16 gigabytes of RAM, and you only have a limited set of I/O, and you might simply not have enough multi-core performance. At this point, I would say you have two main options right now in the Apple Silicon world. There's the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros with the M1 Pro or the M1 Max, and then there's the Mac Studio with the M1 Max and M1 Ultra. Now I'm going to be honest, there are very few people who actually will need the M1 Ultra. Yes, on paper, it doubles everything the M1 Max has to offer, but as many people have tested, it's really not 2 times in most real-world scenarios. This means you start getting diminishing returns when you're still paying twice the price. The real problem is optimization. In order for software to fully take advantage of the M1 Ultra, it has to be optimized for the chip's specific architecture. So an application that was designed, tested, and built for a specific processor will run great on that specific processor, but on another, it might not run at full capacity. This is the reason why a lot of Mac apps have to run through Rosetta 2 on Apple Silicon Macs, because they haven't been ported over to the Apple Silicon platform. Even applications that are optimized for M1 or even M1 Pro and Max might still run into issues with M1 Ultra because it just came out a month ago. This means it might take a bit for most software to run at its full capacity if you opt for the M1 Ultra. Even Final Cut Pro, which is built by Apple themselves, hasn't been updated to be optimized for it. Of course, that isn't to say that applications will never be able to take advantage of the M1 Ultra. It's just that developers might need some time to port their apps over. Also, it depends on the apps that you use when those will be optimized. For example, if you do audio work in Logic, you'll probably be able to take advantage of that performance before Blender ever gets optimized. That being said, if you need that performance, then by all means go and buy the Mac Studio, as you can't get that kind of processor and anything else right now. As for the M1 Max Mac Studio, it depends on the scenario if you should just buy the MacBook Pro instead. Yes, the M1 Max Mac Studio is much cheaper than the M1 Max configuration of the MacBook Pro, and is in theory the most affordable way to get the chip. But you also have to remember that the Mac Studio does not come with a keyboard, mouse, trackpad, speakers, or display, which you will have to provide yourself. So if you need all of that, it's all included in the MacBook. The MacBook Pro has one of the best displays Apple has ever made. It's mini LED, which makes blacks a lot darker because of local dimming zones, and also has ProMotion, which makes everything look smoother and snappier because of its adaptive refresh rate. Also, there are not nearly as many performance limitations in the laptop form factors there used to be in the Intel days. The M1 Max and all the other M1 based processors for that matter is able to deliver groundbreaking performance with enormous efficiency, so thermal throttling and fan noise should not be an issue. Granted, the M1 Max will give you slightly better cooling, but it's not really a huge difference. So in reality, the MacBook Pros have a better value out of the box if you don't already have peripherals. But if you already have everything you need for the desktop setup and want the highest performance desktop Mac you can get right now, the Mac Studio is the choice for you. Thanks for watching. This is your host Luke, and I will see you in the next one.